So what are going to be the major issues? The budget obviously is always, that's the 800-pound gorilla. And remember, the budget is numbers and money, but the budget is really priorities. The budget is going to be reflective of the priorities of the state. We have a potential shortfall in TxDOT funding because of reliance on bonds that were authorized years ago expiring. We didn't go for more bond debt last time for roads. All that stuff's expiring at the end of next year. So this legislative session, we have Proposition 1 that's going to give us some money from the oil and gas sector. It's going to be a little bit of a solution. We're still going to have another part of transportation funding that we've got to make up for. And I tell people as constitutional, liberty-minded conservatives, fiscal conservatives, who preach limited government, if we're going to preach limited government, then the government that we have and we need and is constitutional needs to work. It needs to work well and it needs to be funded. And I think we're going to do that. I think we have an opportunity to end some of the diversions and hopefully go to a funding mechanism for TxDOT that's more directly connected to something that people can relate to roads. For instance, when you purchase a vehicle, you pay a 6.25% tax on the purchase of that vehicle. I think a lot of Texans could live with that money being wholly dedicated to the roads. I understand that. We all drive on the roads, and dedicating more of the logically connected fees back to roads is an appropriate thing to do. That being said, TxDOT has had some stumbles over the years that have caused a lot of mistrust. We need some new leadership on the Transportation Commission, and there's going to be some spots that open up in the spring. I look forward to some good appointments on that. I'm hoping that the conservative Senate, when they advise and consent on the Transportation Committee appointments, that's going to be a sign that we have a good conservative member of the Transportation Committee that is going to oversee this stuff. It's a lot of the problems that I've seen in TxDOT are not usually at the district level, where you have your local district engineer that's out there just being responsive to your county judge and your local people. But it's when one project gets funded and another one doesn't, and it's not because of the data, it's not because of the engineering studies and the congestion and what roads need to be maintained, but it's a political decision. And it should not be that way. And that's what we want. We want transparency in the way TxDOT does business. Not to mention some of the cost drivers that TxDOT is not TxDOT's fault. The number of federal regulations. I have a good friend that just retired from being a planner for TxDOT. It is unreal what it takes to do a project now in the way of paperwork and environmental studies and all of things. It is just almost impossible. And that's not TxDOT's doing. That's federal stuff rolling downhill on us. That's environmental stuff. That's just regulation upon regulation that has added cost to the way we build roads. There are problems with the way TxDOT, does its bids and its contracts. There's some anti-competitive measures involved that we need to work on. That's all dry and boring, right? Nobody comes up to me, except the people who are involved, to talk about that. Border security is something I've done a lot of work on. Recently, I was involved in, this is a tiny success for your local state rep. I called a meeting in Austin. I got some leadership of the Texas Military Forces in the room, pulled in some of Dewhurst staff who Dewhurst still cares about the border, and pulled in some other members of the legislature in the meeting. I said, I watched you guys lay out your budget the other day in the little staff hearing, getting ready for the session. There wasn't really anything ambitious about it. Where is the cost estimate to secure the whole border? To actually say, what would it take to go from Brownsville to El Paso? And they looked at me and said, we've never been asked to do that. So we're asking. And so worked with Dewhurst staff. Dewhurst signed a 2-page letter, got it over to him. It was great. It's just, I can't tell you how thankful I am. And sure enough, we should know this week some information back from Texas Military Forces. They're doing it. They're coming back, they're doing some planning, they're doing some cost estimates. I was cheering in my chair at 10 o'clock one night when I saw the news story that the estimate had been requested. And I just thought, that's positive.
How did they come up with this 500 number?
I don't know. It's actually a smaller number than I had heard the director of DPS ask for in the past. There's what's called some personnel modeling forecasts that DPS uses. And they sit down and they whip out some numbers. I don't know. I do know this. It will take a very long time to hire that many DPS people. You don't just turn those out in a couple of months. So even, he's referring to Governor-elect Abbott requesting almost 600 new DPS troopers and some more money for their budget. I think that's wonderful. But it is still a half measure at best. I mean, at any given time, if they're working shifts, a third of those guys are only going to be on the line, right? So you're talking about miles and miles. The solution has to be a combination of more DPS troopers, more National Guard, who can be a big force multiplier, and more technology in the form of game cameras.
That's all it takes.
Sort of a virtual wall along the border. And I still believe in some strategic fencing in places. We definitely need some fencing. But the numbers of people that have been coming across the border is massive. They have apprehended over 250,000 already this year.
Matt, if you got whatever this number is, 500 people or 1,000, whatever that number was, what would they actually do? Because even if you apprehend them, the federal government ain't going to do anything to turn loose. So what's the game? What these people got to do to stop them from coming over?
Well, the honest answer is that they do have their hands tied unless the governor really tries to be aggressive and test some new constitutional authority, which I think he should do. But let's say that he doesn't. What they can do is they can interdict people and they can put people in jail that are committing state crimes. And there's a ton of that going on. Mike, they can go directly after the cartel activity. Make no mistake, our border is controlled by the cartels. From Tamaulipas State, across from McAllen, all the way to El Paso. They can name you. I read a report just this week. They'll name every sector. They'll give you a sector. What's happening on our side? And then they'll tell you who controls the other side. It's controlled by cartels. And cartels have territory. And sometimes they get into war with each other. When we make the cost of doing business go up for cartels, we will be making progress. Right now, it's like a water bed. We squeeze them. We can squeeze them down in one area, and it pushes them. They learn, they move, and they go the other direction. Because we don't. I mean, we're only this border surge that we've done is only Rio Grande Valley sector. It's only the McAllen area. It's not Laredo. It's not Big Bend. It's not El Paso. None of those additional assets have been deployed there. It's wide open. It's still wide open. Now, many of us fear that the president's executive amnesty is just going to be like turning the power up on the magnet. We've already gotten word of that. I mean, the cartel, this is a business with them. They market this information. Literally, folks, they market the information put out by the Obama administration in Central America and Mexico. Permiso. They come across the border and say, I want my permiso, I want my amnesty. Cartels are making money off of every person that transits their territory. And so they are taking that information back into Central America and Mexico, and they are using that to make money. It's unreal. They are making a killing off of this. This is the ultimate free market down there. This is the market forces at play. The magnets. Boy, you could talk all night on that. you know, the ultimate magnet is that the United States is a better place to live than where they live. The ultimate thing to do is to help their part of the world get on its feet. And I tell you what, if we put significant effort into securing the borders, I would be totally fine with finding some good faith partners in Guatemala and El Salvador. And let's work with them. I'd be willing to put state funds into something that is not corrupt, but helps people stay where they are. You know, a nation needs people to survive. An economist will tell you there's only 2 ways that gross domestic product increases. One is increased productivity in the economy, and 2, an increase in the number of working age adults. And what happens if you're El Salvador, if you're Honduras, if you're Guatemala, and you're working age adults and your young people are leaving? Is your GDP going to go up or is it going to go down? It's going down. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy for these countries. So to the extent that, you know, our country has some very significant experience working in third world countries, helping them to get on their feet. And we've got some failures to point to, but we've got some successes to point to as well. Our nation has the resources and wherewithal and the strength to make a meaningful effort in Central America and Mexico. Why don't we go there where it benefits them and us? And they're not shooting at us like they are in other places. You know? What would that be like if we could help their economies get on their feet? We're going to have to pay for what happens to these people one way or the other. The way I see it, when they're here, we're paying for them in the schools and the hospitals. And don't tell me that they aren't getting our paid health care. I know, I've talked to the doctors. These federally qualified healthcare clinics, a federally qualified healthcare clinic is one that gets special rules under Medicaid. Okay, it's got more flexibility in how it works.
I just heard on the radio today that 42% of the new Medicare expenditures is immigrants. The latest study.
Now make no mistake, our nation benefits from cheap labor. We do, but we also are hurt by cheap labor too. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I can go on and on about that. I mean, what we do on the magnets, we're working on a bill in my office to put photo ID on the food stamp cards. The food stamp cards, there is rampant fraud with food stamp cards. They are used as currency. They come to the end of the month, they got a few $100 left on there, they just sell it for cash. I mean, it's unreal. It really bothers me. Food stamp, the abuse in it really bothers me. Because, you know, I'm all for helping people that need help, but, you know, I was in Brookshire's the other day, and this man bought all of these donuts, these Krispy Kreme donuts, with his food stamp card had me in line. I was talking to the clerk, I said, "You make this those with food stamps?" She said, "Yes, it makes me so darn mad, you know, this is more lady." And she said, "But that's not the worst." She said, "The other day a lady came in here and she bought a cake from the deli for $52 on a food stamp card and had an $1,100 balance on it." $1,100 balance on the food stamp card. Buying a fancy decorated cake for a party. And
I ain't gonna go on food stamps.
I don't know.
Sell everything.
It's tough. It's tough. And you know, that kind of thing, you know, I've talked to Democrats about this bill. And some of them are like, yeah, let's look at that. Because they don't like that either necessarily. I mean, nobody likes abuse of our welfare system. But some of them don't care.